Hey everybody! Well, today we're going to take a look at another really cool 3D printed model. Now this is a model of the Pylon, the mysterious structures that we saw in the TV show Land of the Lost from the Saturday morning kids TV show Land of the Lost. And this is really cool. I've never seen one of these before and it looks really good. I mean, it's got well, I don't know about the detail here. I think on the show that it was actually all smooth, so maybe it's just the way the thing is on here, the way it's printed, but it looks really good. The paint job is done really well. This was an eBay find, and I couldn't resist it. So Land of the Lost is arguably probably one of the most favorite TV shows of kids that grew up watching a lot of the Saturday morning shows back then. So when that show aired, there were all the Saturday morning programming. It was kind of going through this really cool phase of bringing in these live action shows. It wasn't just cartoons, but it was live action shows with real actors. And most of the shows were kind of dramas. They were not. They were more like a drama show. There was only a couple that were comedies. And Land of the Lost has got to be probably everybody's favorite that grew up watching those shows. In fact, even today, when I talk to friends, when we talk about that time when we were watching TV and stuff, everybody talks about Land of the Lost. It was just a really cool show. And I think it's because it was a really deep show for a kid show. It dealt with things like time travel and future and past and the Sleestak. It was the weird underground lizard creatures. And this is not the Land of the Lost movie with Will Ferrell. That was actually based on the original TV show. So this was the original. But yeah, like I say, back in those days, there was a lot of really excellent kid shows. Now, thankfully, you can purchase all of these shows on DVD. This is the complete first season. I have all three seasons. This show was also unusual for the fact that it ran for 3 seasons. Most of those kid shows back then, it was like one season and that was it. For whatever reason, they just never came back, and they just maybe only had maybe 13 to 16 episodes. This show here was so popular that it lasted 3 seasons, which was just kind of unheard of back then. And this was kind of like the logo here. They had a really catchy theme song that was sung by Wesley Ure, who played Will on the show. And so, of course, the premise was the father, Spencer Milligan, and Holly and Will fall through a time doorway when they are out rafting, and they fall through this waterfall, and it ends up being like a time doorway that throws them into the Land of the Lost, where we have these Sleestak creatures right here, the lizard people looking things, and then they meet the Pakuni. Sorry about the glare here. The Pakuni, which were Chaka was the main one that they became friends with. And so in the first and second season, Chaka would kind of talk Pakuni, and they started to learn the language. And then by the third season, he was able to speak English, probably just as a time saver, so they didn't have to keep doing the translations and stuff. And there was some other changes that happened in the third season as well. Now, one of the many shows that came on Saturday morning was Space Academy. This was one of my favorites. It had Jonathan Harris as Commander Gampu. This is after his Lost in Space days. Pamela Ferdin, who was on a ton of different shows as a little girl. Of course, she was older by this time. And a couple of other actors that would appear that I'd really never see again. And then Brian Tochi here, he was actually on the original Star Trek episode along with Pamela Ferdin. That was the one where it had that angel that they had to hail. The kids would, do that little chant and go in a circle and bring that, I don't know, he was kind of like their leader or something. And it's kind of odd that they would end up in this TV show together. And then Brian Tochi actually ended up showing up on a Star Trek The Next Generation episode too. It was really cool. But it was a really fun episode. They had this really cool robot named Peepo. And I think he was one of the earliest robots that was an actual real robot for a TV show. He was actually remote controlled, and he'd roll around and his arms would move. He had a really cool voice, and his face had like these two big red eyes. So it was really neat. Just more stuff on here. But I really loved this show. And unfortunately, it only lasted 1 season, but it did kind of go off into another show, which was this one here, Jason of Star Command. And this was another good one. I really like this one. It ended up having James Doohan, Scotty from Star Trek, on it, but he only lasted the first season. And the second season, for some reason, they decided to replace him. But this was another really cool show. It was a lot of the effects were kind of done by the same place that did the effects for Space Academy, and I think they probably reused a lot of the stuff from that show as well to save time. But the special effects were pretty well done for a Saturday morning kid show. I was actually pretty amazed at the model work and how good the ships looked. And it was just kind of a fun show. I mean, these were all, cheesy shows, but they were kid shows. But as a kid, man, we just loved all of this stuff. It was so fun to watch it. This was another one that I absolutely loved. It was called Arc 2, and it was about the world after, I think, some kind of war devastated the planet, and there was just, not very many people around anymore, and they had these scientists that traveled around in this futuristic-looking vehicle right here, which would later be used for the front end of the Seeker spacecraft in Space Academy, at least for the life-size prop. But these were the main characters. They were the main scientists, and they had this little chimpanzee, I can't remember his name, that would kind of talk a little bit. And this was another really cool show, the way they traveled around in this. And they had different adventures trying to help different people that were left on the Earth after the devastation. That's that really cool. I mean, the star of the show was the Ark 2. It was such a cool looking vehicle. And in the back, a little dune buggy thing that you can see right there. It would come out of the back so they could scoot around in that little kind of futuristic dune buggy. And they also had a jetpack that was used by this guy mainly. So yeah, it was a really great show, and another one that I wish lasted longer. This show would probably be the second most popular show that I think most people remember as kids, and this one also lasted, I think, 2 seasons, and this was Shazam, of course, Captain Marvel, and it was another great show. It was kind of cheesy, of course, because of the special effects and stuff. A lot of these shows used really cheesy chroma key, which was kind of new back then, and but as kids, we didn't really care. Even if it looked fake, it was really fun to watch. And this show here had Les Tremayne, who was from War of the Worlds, and Billy Batson. And they ended up changing Captain Marvel. There was some kind, I can't remember. I think he got injured during one of the stunts on the show. And there was some kind of issue with about him getting medical, help or something, or paying for his medical things. And maybe he sued. I can't remember. And so they ended up replacing him with this Captain Marvel right there. It was a different guy. I can't remember his name. So they ended up changing the Captain Marvels. But they were both okay, but I think the original guy here was the best. But he only came back, or he was only there for the first season. They travel around in this Winnebago that had the little Shazam logo. And they had little lessons on there. They would talk to the Greek gods right here that were in cartoon form. And there was little lessons at the end of every episode that would just kind of teach kids, good things, which was really cool. This was another show that I loved, and I think a lot of kids loved back then. It was The Secrets of Isis, which was kind of an offshoot of Shazam. In fact, Joanne Cameron, who played Isis, would show up on Shazam and Shazam on Isis. It was kind of like, they show up on each other's show. And it was really cool. She finds this amulet that gives her the power of Isis, and she would turn into Isis and have these powers, and she could fly, and she had all these little sayings that she would do to have these things happen. That was the other characters from the show. And I think, let's see, did this show last 2 seasons? I can't remember. Joanne Cameron, she just kind of disappeared for a while, and you didn't really see much of her. She showed up on a few other shows, but, she was such a pretty lady back then. I think just about every young man had a crush on her. But, it was really cool. It was like a crossover show, and kind of like a show that was sprouted from Shazam. While most of the shows were serious dramas, you would have a few that were comedic shows, and that's what this was. Ghostbusters with Larry Storch and Forrest Tucker. These two actually were on the show F Troop before that, so they were very familiar with each other. They were probably good friends. And then this was Bob Burns that was inside the ape costume, who has one of the most amazing collection of Hollywood memorabilia from sci-fi and kind of horror and stuff like that. If you check him out on YouTube, he's got the most incredible collection of stuff. I would love to go visit his house. But this was another cool show. And in fact, when the Ghostbusters movie came out, they wanted to use this name, but it was owned by this production company. Let's see, who did this? I can't remember. But they had to actually pay this company that did this show the money to use the Ghostbusters name. And it was just a fun little show. They were just out there getting ghosts, but it was a comedy. But I really love this one too. And finally, this was another one of my favorites, Far Out Space Nuts. They had a really catchy theme song at the beginning that I really loved, and the end was really cool. This was pretty much Gilligan's Island in space. It had Bob Denver playing the typical bumbling Gilligan-type character. And then we had Chuck McCann, who was kind of the skipper role. And these guys, they accidentally launched off into space because they were doing a check on the capsule, the rocket that was going to go up. And when they were doing the launch check, he pushes launch. And the famous, I said launch, not lunch, or lunch, not launch. and they end up taking off and getting lost in space, basically. And this was a character named Honk, played by Patty Mahoney. And it was just a fun show. They had really cool music in the show. It was kind of like space age synthesizer music that was kind of, innovative for its day. Here you can kind of see the characters. They'd run into all these crazy aliens throughout every episode, and it was just fun. It was a fun show to watch. I really enjoyed this. Unfortunately, it only lasted one episode too. I don't think this has ever been officially released on DVD. I found this at a convention, and it has every single episode. And the way they ended this show, let's see, how did they do it? I think there was some kind of a time warp thing where the whole thing starts all over again. It was a really clever way of ending the show so that you could kind of rewatch the whole series, and it was kind of just going in a loop. But it was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And that's just the ones that I remember. There's a few others that I never did watch, like Bigfoot and Wild Boy, and well, that's the only one I can think of. But yeah, some amazing shows back in those days. Looking back at the old special effects that they used to use on this show, this was the old style chroma key where everything was kind of done in front of a blue screen. So you can kind of tell that this is just a miniature river and water, and they just superimpose these guys on the raft. Same with this shot here. You can kind of tell that's just all miniaturized. But, it looked cheesy, but we still loved it as kids. And Sid and Marty Krofft, they made some of the coolest shows back then. I mean, they were really ahead of their time in children's programming just because they did stuff that other people just weren't doing. And Land of the Lost has to be one of their most popular and probably well done shows of all time. This show also must have been pretty expensive to produce considering the special effects that were involved. There's quite a few special effects in this show, including stop motion animation that they did for these dinosaurs, which was pretty well done for its day, really. And then here's another one that was kind of a different view of a different dinosaur. But, for a Saturday morning kids show budget, that had to have been pretty tight for them to pull that off. But they managed to do it, and it looked pretty good. So these were the pylons that were on the show. They're these pyramid-shaped structures, and they were gold, and they were always kind of mysterious. I always loved these things, and they had these matrix tables on the inside, which I'll show you what that looks like. So in order to get inside the pylons, you'd have to turn that key that's up at the top. It's like a pyramid-shaped thing, and it had kind of like that reflective rainbowish tape on there. It was really cool, and when you turn it, the front door would mysteriously open. And here you can see how the front door opens. So this is what the matrix table looked like on the inside of the pylons. It looked like it was made of stone, and it had all these interesting lit colored jewels inside, and depending on which ones you touched, it would control different things like time doorways or the weather and other things. It was a really cool concept. Here's a good view of what the pylons look like, and you can see how big they are in comparison to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And so you can see how it's that kind of gold pyramid-shaped structure. It just has a flat top to it. But they were really cool. This episode was titled Skylons, which was kind of our first introduction with the matrix table. This is the first time they discovered that you could go inside and see these things, and this is when they learned that touching the different jewels is what would cause different things happening in the Land of the Lost. So that's Rick Marshall, the father, and then that's Chaka, who would become a regular on the show. And I gotta say, the actor that played him, I can't remember his name, but as a child actor, he did a really good job playing Chaka. I mean, that couldn't have been an easy role for a kid to play. And also in the behind-the-scenes commentary, it's funny to hear how he really didn't like the makeup. It was really hard, and they would put shoe polish on his hands, so his hands always felt sticky, and he just kind of, hated it. But the fact that he did as good as he did as a child actor, you got to give the guy credit. This show was so cool on so many levels. This was the Lost City, and the Sleestak lived down in there because the Sleestak didn't like the light. And then they would later meet a futuristic Sleestak named Enoch who could actually talk. And he thought that he was from the future, but he was actually from the past of the Sleestak. And he found out that because of their warring ways and the way that they lived their lives, they actually destroyed their own world. The Lost City here was actually a beautiful place that Enoch used to live, but then he found out that they destroyed themselves. So now he's the Sleestak, the primitive ones, are what they turned into in the future. So now he's got to try to get back in time to warn his people about what their future is going to hold for them. So these were the Sleestak. They were like these lizard beings, and they were really cool looking. And I think they had basketball players play these guys because they were really tall. And I think they only had maybe 2 or 3 costumes, so it always had to be the same guys playing the Sleestak at the same time. But they were always kind of creepy on the show. Now, this was Ta and Sa. They were part of the Pakuni tribe that Chaka belonged to. And Ta, let's see, which one was which? I can't remember. The girl was on the left. The guy was on the right. So I think it's Ta, I guess is him. I can't remember now. I have to watch these episodes. But he was always kind of a jerk on the show. I didn't really care for him. And I don't know, he was always kind of mean. He was mean to Chaka. But I guess they later decided these characters weren't very popular because they wouldn't show up again on, I think the second season they got rid of them, or maybe it was the third season. I think it was the second season. I think they were only in the first season of the show. But yeah, they were the other 2 actors that had to play Pakuni. So this is Enoch. He's the one that I was telling you about earlier. He's the intelligent Sleestak that finds out that he was stuck in the land of the lost here as well. And then he's the one that finds out that his future is doomed unless he returns back to his people. So the actor that played him was Walker Edmonston, and he actually did a lot of voices for cartoons. He also played a miner in an earlier episode. But he talks about this costume and how he had to wear a mouthpiece so that when he talked, the mouth could move, and how it was really kind of hard to see out of the costume through those red lenses on his eyes, which is pretty cool. And then about quite a few years ago, like 8 or 9 years ago, I saw this program where somebody owned the original Enoch costume right there, and they had it in their living room. I think it has since been sold at auction, but because it was made of some kind of latex rubber and stuff, it was coated with some kind of material that would help preserve it. So, I'm not sure if that was good. Well, it was probably good to help preserve it, but it had a shiny look to it because of it. But at least it's preserved. But, back then, a lot of these costumes weren't made to survive the years. But it's cool that the Enoch costume did. A fun little blooper to point out on this show is whenever somebody walked out of the cave, that's supposed to be the blue sky back here, but you can clearly see the shadow of Enoch being cast on the background. So it's kind of funny. But, hey, it's a low budget show. What can you say? Well, actually, it happens in high budget shows too. I think this was my favorite episode of the series. It was called Follow That Dinosaur from season 1. And it was, I don't know, it had a kind of a weird feel to it where they discovered this dummy that was left but there by, I think, like a pirate that got caught in the land of the lost. And he left this map as to how to get out of the land of the lost. So they start following his map, and they find out that the ending was kind of grim. The pirate guy left this diary for them to read, and then that's when they discover that he'd been there quite some time ago, and that he talks about the Sleestak and the Pakuni. It's kind of cool. It's kind of eerie, though. So the diary leads them into the lost city, where they follow the pirates' map and how to get out of this land of the lost. But when they get there, they find out that he actually died, and there was a partner with him. You can see his bones right here. He had a partner too, and that's where he originally was. He went after his partner because his partner never returned, and he figured that he got out of the land of the lost. But it turns out both of them didn't make it, and it was a pretty gruesome episode for a kid show. It was actually kind of surprising considering the demographic that this show was actually playing towards. So after escaping the Sleestak out of the lost city, they read the final installment of the diary, and they find out that, of course, they were right all along, that he never made it out, and that the Sleestak reawakened from their dormant state from a volcanic activity that happens. And so it's kind of sad at the end. You find out they're still stuck in the land of the lost after all that. And but it was just kind of a cool episode just because of how eerie it was, and kind of the subject matter of it being pretty serious and deep for a kid show. So this was the last episode of season 1. It was called Circle, and it is a really cool episode as well, because clearly the producers of the show were not thinking that this show would get picked up for a second season, so they decided to end it in a way that they kind of ended the Far Out Space Nuts, like I mentioned. So they decided to end it in a loop. So it turns out that Enoch discovers that when the Marshall family fell through the time doorway, they actually should have died when they fell over the falls, but they somehow ended up here no matter what, and it's kind of a mystery. But there's a loop that's playing in the time doorway area where you keep seeing them falling down over the falls in a raft. So a paradox actually had occurred in the time doorway right here when they went over the falls, and so they realized that in order for them to get out of the land of the lost, they need to enter the time doorway at the same time that the original three marshals fell down the falls. It's really deep, and so it's kind of like everything has to go back into balance, and so the time doorway is caught in this loop. So as soon as the original Marshall family falls over the falls, the other Marshall family can now go through the time doorway and it'll release the loop. And then the whole thing starts all over again. So you can pretty much basically watch the whole series all over again until it goes into this loop. It's actually pretty mind-boggling for a kid's show. I always was amazed at the way the first season ended. And it's all because the producers didn't think that the show was going to last past the first season. And so the Marshalls go through the time doorway, and then the whole thing starts all over again, and it even ends with the same segment that they use for the intro, because they showed the whole story starting all over again. And then Enoch can now finally go home as well. It's pretty cool the way they ended it, and it's just like I said, it's just so deep for a kid's show. By season 3, there was quite a few changes made. So Spencer Milligan here, who played the father, had a falling out with Sid and Marty Krofft, the producers, because by this time the show was being merchandised, and his face was appearing on everything from lunch pails to T-shirts and everything else, and he felt that he should be getting, some credit for that. He should be getting some residuals for it, and they could not come to a deal. And so Spencer Milligan quit the show, and so they explained his absence away by having an earthquake hit the land of the lost, and then Rick Marshall goes through this time doorway and ends up going home. And so this actually is not Spencer Milligan. It's a different actor with a wig on to imitate the father, because they, of course, couldn't get him to play that role. So, yeah, that was one of the changes made. So now we have a new character introduced. This is Uncle Jack, who was out looking for the Marshall family, and he ends up falling over the falls and ends up going through the same time doorway that the Marshalls did. So this is Ron Harper, who played Uncle Jack. So, as I mentioned, Chaka now speaks English much better by the third season, and it just made it a whole lot easier for communication on the show, which is why I'm sure they did it. And also the fact that the actor was getting older and stuff, too. But, yeah, that was I think it was a good change for the show. Unfortunately, due to the earthquake, their home got destroyed, the cave that they used to live in, so then they had to find a new place to live. So there's a place called the Old Temple that they decide that they're going to go ahead and start taking up residence, which was actually kind of a cool set. It was much better than the old dusty, musty cave. And the inside was pretty roomy, and as the show went on, it became more homey as well. And they came up with this rolling door, which is pretty cool, so that way it would roll on the logs, and they could shut the door when they needed to. And, of course, the Sleestak were back, because they were kind of a fan favorite. But, so, yeah, even with all these changes, I mean, I think, unfortunately, Season 3 was destined to be their last. There was, I don't know, I think the show started to kind of lose steam after a while. Actually, Ron Harper did a good job playing the new adult role, but it wasn't quite the same without the father. And also the show started taking a different turn where they started doing singing in it. Will would do some singing, and sometimes Holly. And for me, personally, that really kind of ruined the show for me. They didn't need to add singing to it. It was supposed to be a drama show, and then it kind of turned into this little music number at the end. It was just a short song, but it was just kind of cheesy. And also the fact that, the show had run 3 seasons, which was really unlikely, or very unusual for a show like this. And by this time, the demographic was growing up. And, they're starting to kind of become teenagers and doing their own thing by this time. So, I don't think this third season actually had that many episodes either. It was kind of a shorter season. So, looking back at this 3D printed model of the Pylon, this actually looks like it might be about actual size to the filming miniatures, judging by pictures that I've seen behind the scenes of when they were animating the dinosaurs with the stop motion. But what's really cool is, let me see if I can get inside here. If you look, there is a matrix table in there, which is really neat. You got the little jewels and everything inside there. It's nice and dark and mysterious like the real one. And what else is really neat is is it comes with this little light that you attach to the bottom. So let me show you how that works. So on the bottom here is a little hole that you can see, and it just goes right down inside there. This is one of these twist lights, where you just twist it to power it up, just like that. So you can turn it on and off. You don't have to leave it on all the time, so it just fits right in here. There's a little bit of a hook right here, if you can see, to make it easier to pull out of there. And then you just tighten it up. So I wonder if you can tighten it while it's in there. No, I guess you got to do it before. Oh, actually it is on. All right, well, let me make sure. It's a little loose. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's put that in there now. Okay, and then now that lights up the matrix table. So let me get a close-up of that so you can see it. And there it is inside there. The way they made those jewels, they're really nice and crisp and clean looking. They don't have a foggy look to them. And the matrix table looks really cool too. Let me turn off the light so we can see what it looks like in the dark. All right, so there we go. Looks pretty cool. They got the nice mixture of colors in there. It's kind of hard for the camera to focus on it because now it's getting washed out, but you can kind of see, oh, there we go. Yeah, that looks really cool. And on the inside, you can kind of see it's got quite a bit of room up here on the top. And after watching that episode, the Pylon does have this pattern on it. I never noticed that before. For some reason, I thought it was kind of smooth. And here you can see what the top looks like. So this is really neat. This was another eBay find. I think I mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but it's pretty cool. I mean, I got it from the same seller that I got the Nomad model from, which I'm not sure if that video is going to be up already by the time this one is, but you'll see that video if it's not up yet. But I really like the way that looks. That's really cool. Has that kind of creepy look to it. I can even hear the sound effects that the the matrix table made. Yeah, I love it. So there we go, a nice little walk down memory lane, remembering our childhoods of watching Saturday morning cartoons back in the day, eating our bowl of cereal. I used to live for Saturday mornings. I'd get up at 6 in the morning because that's when the first cartoon started, and then the last cartoon would end at 11:30. And I always remember it was the Pink Panther show. I was always so sad because the music at the end of the show made me sad because it meant that that was the last cartoons until the following Saturday. So I used to just absolutely live for Saturdays, as I think most of us kids did back then. And I don't even think they do Saturday morning cartoons anymore, do they? I mean, I don't know. It's not the same. They were actually playing Land of the Lost on, I think it was MeTV for a while in the mornings on a regular basis, like every Saturday morning, just like, it was when we were kids. It was really cool. I had gone back to watch a lot of those episodes. Unfortunately, when those shows are on TV now, older shows like that, they cut the heck out of them. A half an hour show may have ran 20, maybe 25 minutes or 24 minutes. And nowadays a half hour show is about 18 minutes because they got to put all those commercials in. And so they cut the heck out of the episode. So if you remember certain scenes watching a show, then you remember, oh, hey, whatever happened to whatever that episode was, whatever happened to this scene, and they just cut it completely out. And so it looks like a piece of that light came off there. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope maybe those of you who grew up watching those TV shows that I showed are kind of having a walk down memory lane as well. Just a great innocent time when we were younger and things were just much more simple. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate it. Hit the like button if you'd like, and also subscribe if you'd like. I'd really appreciate that as well. So thank you again. I'll see you on the next video, and have a good one.